Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here, throwing some comic books around. Time to throw some of my comic book thoughts at you today. Just whatever comes to my mind about stuff I've read this past week.
Sophocles, also Sappho, unless you know Shelley and Keats and Pope.
So I've started a print subscription to Captain America from Marvel. I've had good luck with Marvel subscriptions. My copies have usually arrived not damaged or very slightest little bends or something, but usually in good shape. I know other people have had bad luck with that. But since it's pretty much 50% off, and I'm a little reluctant to spend money on Marvel, sometimes it feels like a good way to get a little of my physical comics fix when I want a Marvel comic, rather than just do the sensible thing and wait for it to come 6 months later on Marvel Unlimited. But anyway, so on a whim, because of the Chris Samnee art, basically, I decided to pull the trigger on Captain America. And I've read the other two Chris Samnee Captain America issues, and they had a few points in them where people were too perfect, just too good with not any edges. And I think that's a danger of Captain America, or the way people see him now. Because when I was a kid reading Captain America, it seemed like he had lots of flaws, and that was not a problem with me. And apparently not with readers, because apparently Captain America sold quite well back then. I'm thinking of like the Steve Englehart days and stuff. Love the Chris Samnee art. And this is kind of a fun one, kind of your classic kind of story where Kraven the Hunter has captured Captain America, and wants to go on the hunt. And it's kind of like a chess game where Kraven has thought many steps ahead with many sort of feints and fake outs within the story, and I thought it was very clever, and it was a pretty riveting story. It kind of, for me, bypasses the problem of Captain America being too good or whatever. And my only complaint about Chris Samnee art is I feel like he exaggerates Captain America a little too much on the muscle-bound side. My ideal Captain America is a little more lithe and a little bit less the muscle-bound kind of hero. Leave it to other heroes to be overly sort of top-heavy in the chest and shoulders and biceps, I would think, to contrast between them. But clearly, Chris Samnee thinks that's part of his exaggerated cartooniness of Captain America, I think, as kind of a living embodiment of the cliched superhero. Kind of like Superman or something. And Superman would be another comic I'd love to see Chris Samnee on. This stuff is great. I love Chris Samnee's use of blacks. Who's the colorist here too? I think it's Matthew Wilson. And Matthew Wilson understands when to do a lot with the color and when not, when to keep it simple, and I really like that. He chooses really nice shades to contrast things. The color never got in the way. I only, on looking back on it here, think about how great the color was, actually. So I got a big kick out of this. It was a fun issue. The twist at the end kind of was spoiled for me because I've seen previews of later covers of Captain America. So I kind of know what the next plot arc is. I won't show it to you. There's an interesting callback to the first issue of this Samnee Wade run. I have heard on some podcasts, I don't know if they really know, I guess maybe it was iFanboy, that this is really being written by Chris Samnee and drawn by him, and it's kind of just a plot assist from Mark Waid. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's the case. If it is, if Mark Waid's less involved, that might explain my feeling that the character is a little too simplistic. But anyway, we'll see. I'm enjoying it a lot, so I'm pretty glad I got on the road. This is an awesome cover here for Sherlock Frankenstein and the Legion of Evil. And it's from the world of Black Hammer. The Black Hammer comic was great. It kind of ended on a cliffhanger. Now after this, we're getting another mini-series about Starman, I think, or Star somebody, and I'm not sure who that is. I'd love a series about the guy who's kind of like Adam Strange or something. But anyway, it's a bit frustrating because I want this was just not nearly as good as the main Black Hammer series, and it's basically sketches for good story ideas. Sherlock Frankenstein is finally sort of explained here, but quickly in a few pages, and it would have been great to just have a series about this character arc that he goes through here, where he starts out good, he becomes evil, and he basically becomes good again at the end of his story arc. And it ties in nicely with what we know about him and his romance with what's her name, the Mary Marvel type of girl. But and the art's pretty good here. I'd say the coloring is done by the artist, and sometimes the artist as colorist does disservice to himself, and the art is a little obscured by the color. Not too bad, but kind of if only Dave Stewart had been coloring this, perhaps. Yeah, so what was her name? Another thing is I had trouble here every once in a while realizing I was supposed to read across the page and not down and then over to the next page, because the clues were kind of subtle. The page still seemed to almost divide in the middle of the page. So I would start reading, then I'd go wait a minute, and then I'd go here and look. So Golden Gale, that's what her name was, this Mary Marvel-like character. So anyway, it's kind of a shame. It's kind of a wasted opportunity where he showed us that he could have done a really cool comic book about Sherlock Frankenstein, but he did not. And then the main story here, the stories within the stories are contained by the story of the daughter of Black Hammer searching for what happened to her father, and she's convinced he's not dead, and we know she's right about that. What's her name? Lucy Weber. And we also know from having read Black Hammer that Lucy shows up in the Black Hammer world, in that kind of limbo town where the Black Hammer heroes are now all trapped. So wouldn't we at least expect this 4-issue series to show us how Lucy got there? But it doesn't even show us that. So it doesn't really fill in much at all for the Black Hammer series. So in the end, it's a kind of pretty illustrated notebook of ideas that Jeff Lemire didn't really use, but is just throwing out at us, saying, here's my idea about this, and here's my idea about that. A real shame, especially the wasting of what could have been like a good 4-issue story that really was about Sherlock Frankenstein, as we were shown in the plot here. In fact, each issue could be a different age, the pulp age, the golden age, the silver age, the bronze age, or something like that, which they do kind of give a page to each of those in here. But I will be signing on for the next in the world of Black Hammer, in hopes. It's still kind of cool to have this fun referential to Golden and Silver Age comics kind of new world created by Jeff Lemire. So I'm hoping for something better from Dr. Starr and the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows, great pulp title. This artwork on the cover has a kind of pulpy look. It's also Max Fiumara, I think, is an artist I've seen once or twice, and of course Dave Stewart coloring, which gives me a lot of confidence. I'm not going to read this preview. It looks very non-superheroic. So anyway, I suppose this is not an awful comic. It's partially because it's in the world of Black Hammer. I wanted more of the feel of Black Hammer, and it did not have that feel. It was kind of an okay comic. Kid Lobotomy. I'm not sure what to do here. I've been pretty frustrated with the first 3 issues of Kid Lobotomy. It's kind of interesting to see what is almost a William Burroughs-like approach to human neurosis and psychosis and such. Even though he keeps referring to Kafka, I swear to you, he's mostly taking these riffs from William Burroughs, who even had a section called The Lobotomy Kid, about a lobotomist with a new lobotomy technique in his famous Naked Lunch book. And this, I can imagine something springing off of William Burroughs being amazing and wonderful, and I know some adults who are really loving this, but it's just not clicking with me. It's just frustrating me. And this issue was the first one that had a not linear, but a narrative that I could mostly follow. Although I did have to read and reread these first 3 pages 3 times to be sure I could understand who's who, and this idea that she's a shapeshifter, which is not kind of followed up in the rest of the story. But it's a wonderfully twisted little story. This artist's work, Tess Fowler, is really growing on me. The coloring's really good. He's the colorist, I think. Lee Lowridge. So yeah, Lee Lowridge is a very good colorist. And this had I'll kind of spoil it, because this had a wonderful thing. This is already like a King Lear story, right? That's one of the plot overlays. Kafka, King Lear meets William Burroughs, which just sounds great to me when I say it. It had a wonderful, more subtle twist on what's real and not real by the end than most of these other issues have. But my patience is gone, and I think I'm going to drop this and maybe read at some point later in trade, or even picking up the back issues later. It's almost too much to read. I imagine it would be too much craziness to read in a trade. Like, you kind of want the individual issues in that sense, even though it's really hard. I don't know. I could go either way. It's really hard to track what's going on, and maybe that would be easier in a trade. The trade dress all of Shelley Bond's trying to be hipness in her Black Crown books really bugs me. If you have to try that hard to be hip, you're definitely not hip. You're definitely not cool, Shelley Bond. And you're just making it worse by trying so hard. And it makes me feel like this line of comics, Black Crown, must be doomed because she's trying so hard. I don't know if people are buying into it, and if it will sell on. These are more the kind of books that will find more of their audience in trades, just like Vertigo books did. The other thing I think that kind of pushed me to the point of thinking maybe I should drop this is there was only 18 pages of story here in a $4 book. And I'm used to $4 books having 24 pages of story. So that's like 6 less pages of story. That's kind of my average, at least 22. One of the reasons I don't like to buy Marvel is they charge $4 for 20 pages of story. Which, along with that, the cover that's as flimsy as the interior pages and all of that. And the ink is not running off of this one, but people have had that problem a lot. Anyway, so I don't know, or maybe I'll stick it around. I really have mixed feelings about Kid Lobotomy. Maestros, I'm enjoying more and more, and I have trouble figuring out why. I mean, there's the beautiful artwork, there's kind of the cliches of the fantasy scenario, the other world where magic works, the hero who is of both worlds. But there's something I think about the mix of kind of these familiar light elements and the, I hate to say it, but this sort of disturbing horror imagery and twists and cruelty. We have long scenes with this father, this is kind of a flashback, having put his son on this crucifix of thorns, kind of like a reverse of God and Jesus, I suppose. But it's very emotionally intense, and yet a lot of this is the stuff of like fantasies at the same time. And I'm finding this does a nice balancing act between the light and the heavy. And it's ultimately still a light story, but with this heavy stuff that, I don't know, makes it a little more addictive. And then I was listening to, or watching the tail end of Oddfellow Thoughts Comic Book Roundtable last night, and he was talking about how this really satisfies as a monthly read. And I hadn't thought of that about that, but that's part of it. Each issue gives you a really satisfying monthly read with kind of a twist of a cliffhanger at the end. And each issue adds more to what you know about this world and about these characters as we keep returning to it. So it really is a perfect example of the serialized comic and when it can be a great read. And this is becoming more of an issue to me. I'm really trying to figure out what things I should wait for trade and what things... I know I've been talking about that for a few years, but I feel like I'm trying to focus on that even more. I'm getting very frustrated by the writing for trade. Writing for trade, but depending on monthly readers to pay your bills. So, what's that all about? But yeah, we have a very disturbing twist near the end of this story. This is not looking good on the next cover. So all in all, it's just this twisted sense of humor, the fantasy, the serious sides of it. Maestros gets a big plus from me. And look at those amazing colors. This is Dave Stewart again, and a little bit advancing out of his usual Dark Horse wheelhouse and doing an amazing job in this more colorful fantasy world. Dave Stewart, awesome colorist. Actually, and here's another book, Doom Patrol, with his odd cover. I don't really get the cover. I mean, I can see what's going on. We got a collage of a Doom Patrol VHS and a giant cat with human eyes put into it, and endless clay versions of one of the little side characters. And it says Nada. Isn't there like a Nada League or something of bad guys now that has formed? I'm not sure. I really kind of forgot what I'd learned in the previous issue. And I'm sure what was in the previous issue was kind of confusing stuff anyway. But speaking of great colorists, this has great art, great line art, but it also features one of the strongest colorists in comic books, Tamara Bonvillain, Tamara the Good Villain, and she just brings out the absolute best, in my opinion, in this Nick Darrington artwork, which has a lot of charms. So the artwork, I've said before, is what is the leader for me in the Doom Patrol. The crazy surreal story is fun. I really don't get a lot of it at this point, or there's too many characters that I can't remember who they are or why they're doing what they're doing. Like this scene here, just in this panel, I'm not sure about who all these people are and on which side they're on. I totally can't figure out her, but apparently she has to do with the cult that kind of took his mother away from him. But tons of fun details too in the writing. At the same time, I don't mean to put down the writing. It's just exploding with ideas, I suppose, in a way. Exploding with ideas and characters. And the idea that this family has now been taken off to hell with this creature, and I don't know if we've seen this creature before or know something about him, although I do remember that their son was messing in occult magic a few issues ago. And then there's this crazy thing where, I can't remember her name now, our main character, so to speak, but we have so many characters I've lost track. Is her name Terry Nunn, maybe? Or is it Casey Brink? And that's Terry Nunn. That's Terry Nunn. That's Casey. So Casey is a fictional character that came out of Danny the Street, who is now a van or whatever. And I'm not sure who this Nada character, Terry Nunn is. The daughter of one of the other characters. And somehow this is their baby. Was there any foreshadowing of that? I just can't remember. And they bring out briefly the professor from the old Doom Patrol. But then we have this other character I almost thought was the professor, but it's not. There's the little creature that's on the cover, but I can't for the life of me remember the significance of that little creature. So there you go. A fun read. 22 pages at least. With amazing colors and amazing art and interesting surreal story. But this probably... It might be a bit overwhelming in trade, but it might also be much easier to read in trade. But I have no reason to stop getting it, despite that. This is one I need to make a special note to go back, and there's been 10 issues so far. Go back and maybe read all 10, or the next time there's kind of a pausing point, go back and read all the issues together. Well, these two kind of are a match set in my mind. They look completely different, but they're kind of like, aside from the whole question of whether to read things in trade or serially, there's another question of like, this is not really my worry as a reader, but writer's worries is what really makes a story? What really makes me care about a story? Why did I enjoy and care about Ice Cream Man, and I just didn't quite enjoy and care about Vinegar Teeth? I vaguely gather that this guy Troy Nixie, who co-wrote and did all the art in here, is some kind of one of the hipper artists, maybe more part of the underground, but maybe not. I don't know. But it does have a bit of a feel of an alternative comic in the 90s or something. Where there's just kind of a goofy surrealism. But basically it's a buddy cop movie where one of the cops is this newly hatched, grotesque creature that seems to come out of nowhere, I guess out of this factory. And comes in the middle, pops up in the middle of this undercover cops about to catch the bad guys with the goods scene. And he basically eats one of the bad guys. It eats one of the bad guys. And ruins our undercover cop hero's case. And somehow the public, and this is the chief of police, I guess, the public, and this is the mayor, even though it looks like 1920s or something, it's a lot of women in leadership roles. But anyway, the public, for some reason, and the mayor have decided this giant Cthulhu-like slug thing is the hero of the case. And for some reason, they decide to call it Vinegar Teeth. And for some reason, they want this Cthulhu-like creature to continue to be a hero, so they assign our main character, the cop whose undercover job was ruined, to be his partner and to make sure he does well. I keep saying he for the character Vinegar Teeth. To make sure Vinegar Teeth does well and keep Vinegar Teeth out of trouble and all of that, so that the publicity will be good, or the mayor threatens him with his job, because somehow the mayor's popularity now rests on Vinegar Teeth. Crazy story. I just couldn't get into it, and it seems so close to something I'd like. Here's the Vinegar Teeth puffs up, and then most of its body looks like a scrotum. Yummy. The color in here is amazing. It's by someone who I think is normally a penciler, a Guy Major, or no, maybe I'm confusing with another guy someone else. Anyway, great coloring. Most of the art I really like. There can be key moments where I'm not quite sure what's going on. Near the end, some kind of werewolf or monster shows up and he shoots at it, and I guess, you shouldn't have to go back 3 times to try to figure out what happened in the panels. But I guess the monster burst out the top of the cop car and then jumped away. Here the coloring doesn't help him, because if that's that monster, it's just hard to make out what happened. The coloring doesn't help and the art does not help explain what happened. Just as some of the early scenes create confusion. But I don't think my not clicking with this has to do with the art so much as something about the characters and something about the distance of the narrative or something. Because this story has cops, a monster who is also an ice cream man, a kid who's kind of a monster. It's really wild. This kid has a pet spider that has killed his parents. There's also a werewolf out there. There's these cops who are kind of burnt out and don't really care. The art here is fine. The coloring is fine, but it's not nearly as exciting as in Vinegar Teeth. But I really connected with this. I don't know why. I just really got sucked into the story and was really happy sort of enjoying this, surreal... It's a surreal horror story. A little bit... Oh, suddenly forgot the director's name. Anyway, the director of a little bit Mulholland Drive, a little bit a Halloween slasher movie or something. I don't know. So I really enjoyed it. It kind of, I'm trying to skip over quickly. It kind of read, you could almost read it as a surreal horror one-shot, which ends horrifically. But it says come back soon. I'm curious to see if the next time will be a completely different story, but somehow connected with this ice cream man and the ice cream truck, or whether it'll continue to weave bits and pieces like the stories of the cops and the kid and stuff, if they'll kind of reoccur even as it goes on to some other aspect of horror. But it was really good. Lots of pages, really high quality paper. So I don't know. I can't decide if I like Vinegar Teeth enough to try another issue, or maybe wait for it in dollar bins or whatever. I liked the art. There was something about it I liked, but it just didn't click with me. But I'm definitely putting Ice Cream Man on my pull list. And it's also a satisfying, like I said, it felt kind of like a complete story in one issue, but kind of also made me want to come back and see what further twists, turns, and twists things will take. So, wow, 27 minutes. 28 minutes probably by the time I'm done. I thought I would do this pretty quickly. I thought I'd be doing another 15-minute video. Anyway, so it goes. Talk to y'all later.